Y los invitamos a tener una perspectiva de una época, de un tiempo que se proyecta hacia acá. Goya, una estupenda muestra cuya selección que estamos encarando nos lleva a invitarlos a que en nuestro YouTube vean el resto de la nota. No tenemos espacio para tanta información ni tanto material, pero para nosotros es un orgullo presentarla porque Goya y sus dibujos son una imagen muy fiel de un tiempo y de una documentación única, dinámica y muy comprometida. Y transmitimos nada menos que esta muestra, que está avalada por los mejores materiales recopilados en el Metropolitan de New York.
I'm Mark McDonald. I'm thrilled to invite you to a virtual tour of Goya's graphic imagination. Francisco Goya is possibly the most famous Spanish artist from the 18th century. He's known for his portrait paintings, his frescoes, and also mainly for his prints and drawings. He plumbed the depth of humanity, issues such as conflict, personal pain, and social foibles. So many subjects that are now so pertinent in our day. Come and join me on a virtual tour to see some spectacular prints and drawings. Goya is sometimes called the last of the old masters and the first modern. From the 1770s through 1828, he experienced so many changes in politics, in thinking, enlightened thinking. He's very much embedded in a society of change. And he is a witness to his time and also a witness to his own thought processes. And so how he thinks is expressed through prints and through drawings. And there's no other artist who embraces so much through graphic art. Goya's graphic imagination addresses two things. Firstly is art on paper, prints and drawings. These are two mediums which the artist spent his entire career devoted to. A second point is imagination. These are not commissioned works. As such, they provided a platform for original thought and to convey profound meaning through an extraordinary range of images. In the 1770s, Goya embarked on a series of etchings after Velázquez, a famous 17th century painter who was thought of as being the most talented, most outstanding Spanish artist ever. Goya started exploring the paintings through a series of carefully articulated drawings. He then transformed into etchings. We see here a false Bacchus, a painting from the 1630s by Velázquez, and it shows figures bowing down to a false god. Goya is not trying to translate or imitate the painting exactly, he's interpreting it. And we see things such as a broad smile, open mouth, a costume, the hats. So he's trying to update the expression to appeal to an 18th century audience. This small, intense self-portrait shows the artist examining himself so closely. It's made in 1796, 2 or 3 years after he turned totally deaf. At that time, he was almost 50 years old, so turning deaf at such a late age must have impacted him profoundly. It is the most moving, intense study. It shows the artist analysing himself so carefully. He is examining not so much his appearance, but his state of mind. In the 1790s, Goya turned his attention to making drawings in albums. They allowed him to explore intimate subjects for his own purposes. They are not meant for a public. They are not meant to be seen apart from a small circle of his friends. The first such album is Album A, made in Madrid. There are 18 known drawings from Album A, and they all show females performing various tasks. Some are cleaning, some are sleeping, and some appear to be inside a bordello. Album B also dates from the mid-1790s. It's a far more ambitious album. There are 98 known drawings, and they show a far greater spread of subjects. These drawings span from social relations to drunkenness, to debauchery, to masquerades, through temper tantrums. They're an album of drawings that explored, in a broader sense, human interactions, how people act privately and publicly. And the captions they tend to approximate is inquiring mind. If there were no captions, the meaning of these drawings would be impenetrable. So the captions open a small door to possible meaning. Many of the drawings from Album B form a basis for the Caprichos, a series of 80 aquatint etchings published in 1799. The term caprichos means fanciful subjects, asserting artistic imagination and skill. The first part of the series focused far more on social customs and folly and vanity, and the second part transforms two subjects and themes of, say, far darker superstition, more monsters, witchcraft practices, and ignorance. Aquatint is a surface tone that varies in intensity from a pale and transparent surface tone to a thick, dark cloud. Throughout the series, Goya employed many shades, many intensities of aquatint to evoke emotional states. Plate 43, The Sleep of Reason, Produces Monsters, is the most famous print from the entire series. It shows a slumbering artist and the nightmare visions emanating from his dreams. It refers specifically to how, if there is no clear thinking or reason, monstrous forces emerge. Alongside the print is the preparatory drawing. The drawing is similar to the etching, but not the same. The self-portrait clearly shows the artist inserting himself into the vision. In a print, he transcends, moves on from a strict self-portrait to a far more universal statement where these things affect not just the artist but the entire society. From the 1810s, Goya started making Album C, also known as the Inquisition album. So many of his sketches from Album C address the repressive church, the repressive authorities, and the fear a government might impose more restrictions on Spanish people. The range of subjects throughout Album C is so impressive, it's seen as being a key to the artist's thinking in that period. Album C and Album F overlap. This drawing shows a girl perhaps dancing or tearing her hair. There's no clear subject as such. Those seated around her, some pay attention to her and some don't. It is a drawing that exemplifies and shows so clearly his imagination and how might these figures, might these settings, say, tend to multiple subjects and far more universal themes. The 33 aquatint etchings known as Tauromaquia were published in 1816. They show the evolution of bullfighting in Spain from ancient times to the early 19th century. They pitch man against beast. So there is a contrast between a brutality of subject and the superb treatment of figures and space. The 33 etchings were published 2 years after the end of the Napoleonic War in Spain. So in a sense, the entire series seems to underscore a far greater concern for violence and conflict. This print shows the mayor of Torrejon being impaled by a bull, and figures flee from the rampaging animal. Side by side, we see a sketch and the etching. The steps between a drawing and the final etching shows the artist rethinking of the entire space. It's far more abstract and certain parts are far emptier. It makes us imagine a passage of a rampaging animal from the left-hand side into the bleachers and impaling the town mayor. Of interest is a small figure in the background. This might be a self-portrait of Goya witnessing this scene. In 1807, Napoleon's forces entered Portugal. In 1808, they entered Spain, initiating a 6-year conflict that had so many victims, caused so much chaos, and tore Spain apart. The series of 82 aquatint etchings responds to that conflict. The first section embodies conflict, killing, violence, the injustices inflicted on average Spanish individuals. A second section addresses a famine in Madrid from 1811 to 1812. Here are scenes of starvation and death. The third section addresses bad government and the corrupt church. They're close-up views. There's no, say, drawn-out narratives. They're intense snapshots, call them, and he focuses on showing the pain of the ordinary person. Throughout the entire series, the artist changes his technique to suit certain subjects. In the first section, a small flecks on the skin of the individuals who have been shot or stabbed underscores their pain so powerfully. The sheet of paper, not all areas are etched equally. Some are unetched and certain parts are over-etched, dense and black. And so the contrast between spotlit areas, spotlit figures, underscores their pain. In the second section of a famine, the aquatint forms a thick curtain of sadness and drenches the entire scene. And the prints from the third section, the allegories, are far more open in their technique. They aren't as careful, they're far more abstract in a sense. The series was made from 1810 to 1815 and not published until 1863. I suspect there was simply no appetite for etchings of this subject in those awful times, and as such, they are a personal platform for Goya. They are him thinking through things he'd seen. A seated giant is my favourite print of all the artist's images. It's made all in aquatint, there's no etching here, and the medium effects a smoky, ambivalent, strange, moving, omnipresent atmosphere. A giant sits there in a landscape, a naked giant. He turns toward us, and something seems to have caught his attention. He sits atop a plateau in this undulating and desolate landscape. The curved plateau seems to suggest possibly on the top of the world. He's being illuminated by the rising sun. And so the strong muscular forms, the shiny patches, add to a sense of transition. And it might encapsulate Goya's sadness or his despondency at the 6-year conflict in Spain. Landscape is made from 1807 to 1810. It's a simple image with unsettling qualities. Similar to the giant, there's a strange sense of unease in this print. There are two large forms on each side flanking the figures in the foreground. On the right-hand side, there is this huge, alarming rock, and trees sharply bisect that rock. On the left-hand side, there's cloud banks formed through aquatint. These two strong, forward-moving forms seem to tower over the unsuspecting figures in the foreground. To me, the print presages the invasion of Spain by the French troops. They come before the storm, so to speak. For me, the 22 etchings forming the Disparates are the strangest series of prints ever made. The title Disparates means follies. Now, follies might mean anything from stupidity to violence to non-thinking. The entire series seems to address strange and tense situations. The aquatint forms a strong sense of a liminal zone. It's neither nighttime nor daytime, neither dusk nor dawn. A series seemed to have been made from, say, 1815 through to, say, 1819. After 1814, when the war ended, there was still such poverty and such suffering, and from 1815 onwards coincides with Ferdinand VII's violent, despotic government. As such, this series of prints seems a take on that ongoing suffering from a more imaginative, non-narrative angle. It is the artist thinking and dreaming out loud on paper. In 1824, Goya moved to France on a self-imposed exile. In Spain, the 1820s was a time of uncertainty, unstable politics, poverty, and still immense social unrest. He moved to France, possibly through fear of repercussions and for being a liberal. He was 78 years old and stone deaf, so the move must have caused great anxiety to him. In France, he made 2 albums of drawings. They show him with such focus, drawing subjects such as madness and drunkenness and stupidity, age-old themes which so absorbed him. He also turned his attention to lithography, and he made 5 spectacular prints called Bulls of Bordeaux. These are large format prints showing fights from memory in these large sweeping views and crowded spaces, thought of as some of the most striking images in this medium ever made. So many of these subjects are so pertinent nowadays. Ongoing conflict, violence, superstition, fear. What does it mean to act and to be in this world? These same concerns still affect and afflict us now, making his insight, his artistry, his monumental achievement seem equally as pertinent now as in the 18th century. The Met is so interested in themes and subjects that are in a sense universal. How art can express what it is to be human. And there's no artist more interested in understanding our fears, our motivations, things that drive us than Francisco Goya.